Not all house guests are as stupid as they look. Especially useful for folks on the beach side. Get the Guest by Peter Fiebelman. Tasteful tips for stressed out hosts. From November through May, for 7 months a year, nobody wants to visit Martha's Vineyard Island. No matter how hard I try, I can't get people to come here to see me, especially in cold months. Their excuses are always noble ones, ranging from the strict observance of duty,
I can't help being puritanical about work,
to an ailing and unpopular relative.
Poor Uncle Willie. If I didn't sit with him, who would?
But when summer comes, Duty and Uncle Willie could drop dead, for warm weather means beaches and boating and swimming. From June through October, you can't keep people away. The first summer I owned a house on the island, I got calls from friends I hadn't heard from in 20 years, all of whom wished to make up for lost time by staying with me for a while. By, quote, make up for lost time, unquote, they meant they wanted to use my house as a hotel. And by a while, they meant an indeterminate period extending anywhere from a month to the entire season. Toward the middle of September, I felt like a somewhat incompetent but wildly successful innkeeper who couldn't keep up with the trade. By then, I'd tried various ploys to ensure a little privacy, none of which made any difference. When I told people that I work every day from early morning to mid-afternoon, they always understood. When I explained that I didn't have time to plan and serve 3 meals a day, they sympathized. When I said I didn't wish to be spoken to till 3 p.m., they agreed, happily. Once, when I went downstairs for a cup of coffee around noon, an especially polite house guest, respecting my desire for silence, smiled at me and wrote down on a piece of paper the words, "What time is lunch?" It took me 2 years to cope with the situation. By that time I had learned that getting rid of a house guest is not exactly a talent to be sneezed at. I'd gone through several books of etiquette that touched on the subject, starting with one by Dorothy Rogers, who suggested that the host hand the guest a bunch of stamped envelopes, requesting simply and firmly that they be mailed on the way to the railway station. I tried that one. Either I did it wrong or the substitution of airport for railway station gummed things up. My guest said he'd be happy to mail the envelopes, but he wasn't leaving the island, and did I want him to do anything else while he was out? None of the books on etiquette had much to say about my particular problem, though some of them were fascinating to read, and I was forced to draw up some rules of my own. Making guests disappear is an art, not a science, so my methods won't work necessarily for everybody, but I'm going to present a couple of them anyway. They are intended as a tribute to all the courageous writers of etiquette manuals, past and present, who have fought so hard to make us look genteel. Basic rules of behavior. Since rules of this kind are only as good as the manner in which they're applied, apart from tact, the most essential quality for success in all social endeavors is good taste. Intelligence alone will not get rid of a house guest. When applying my methods, use tact and taste at all costs. Number 1. The nausea ploy. I have chosen the nausea ploy as the first method of dealing with a house guest because it is the most exemplary. Here we see both tact and taste employed to their full advantage. Before beginning, the host must stand alone in front of a mirror and practice facial expressions until the correct look of nausea has been achieved. This sounds deceptively simple, but weeks of hit and miss have taught me to beware of the cheap grimace. It is all too easy for a guest to mistake a look of nausea for one of sexual desire, and many a host has been victimized by this error with disastrous results. Once the proper look has been achieved, the next problem is proper attire. Since the method of guest removal we are considering here works best when applied first thing in the morning, there is one easy rule to follow. The host must dress as he ordinarily would at this hour, but one step down. That is to say, if he is inclined to come to breakfast in a shirt and jeans, then a dressing gown is in order. If a dressing gown is normally worn to breakfast, pajamas are called for. If pajamas are the host's preferred morning attire, then breakfast must be skipped entirely, with the host remaining in bed naked. Let us assume that the host is correctly dressed, has an expression of malaise suitable to the occasion, and has come downstairs to have breakfast with the guest. Before sitting, it is essential to indicate a sharp revulsion at the sight of food. This is best achieved by a faint upward movement of the eyes, accompanied by a slight gasp. Clutching at the stomach is optional, though personally I would advise against it. My own belief is that the host must learn to indicate nausea without spelling it out. The reason for this is simple, and now is as good a time as any to issue a word of warning. Not all house guests are as stupid as they look. Do not underestimate the enemy. You will regret it. Having gone this far, the host must now make an overtly brave effort to face the day as if nothing were wrong. Let us examine this step carefully. Only by seeming to dismiss the illness can the host hope to convince the guest of its veracity. This is called the denial stratagem, and it should be pulled into play as early as possible. If correctly used, the denial stratagem is bound to elicit a remark of concern from the guest, something along the lines of,
Aren't you feeling well?
Or-
Anything wrong with your tummy?
The proper response to such a question is a change of subject, plain and direct, tantamount to shrugging it off, while making sure that the look of nausea is retained. If this is properly done, the guest will force the issue by asking a more blunt question about indigestion, such as,
Listen here, do you feel sick to your stomach or not?
Now is the time for the suppressed belch. This is not easy. Only a truly accomplished host can summon up the delicacy required to produce a tasteful burp and conceal it at the same time. A good example has been set for all of us by such notables as Henry Kissinger and Margaret Thatcher. More recently, a woman who owns a large summer home on Martha's Vineyard and who leads an extensive social life here has become famous for the elegance of her belch, which is a pleasure to watch. Her movements are as graceful as those of a hummingbird, and no house guest in the world would dare to doubt her. The novice, of course, cannot be expected to match her kind of prowess. Even I am not in her league, and I would therefore suggest accompanying the first burp with a suitable remark. I'm sure this isn't contagious. At this point, we come to what the French call the piece of resistance, or as the Spanish have it, the moment of truth. For the remark must be followed by immediate action. There are two ways for the host to carry out this action. The first is by rushing to the nearest bathroom and slamming the door in order to be sick. The second, and more refined of the two, can be done right at the breakfast table with the aid of a large napkin held tightly over the mouth. If a napkin of the proper size is not available, a corner of the tablecloth will do. Remember, however, that there is no substitute for good taste. Under no circumstances do I suggest that the host vomit directly on the guest. It takes the brilliance of a great stylist for that kind of thing, and while Lady X has been known to manage it from time to time, it most certainly should not be attempted by a mere amateur. Once this final step is taken, the battle is almost won, and the rest may be improvised somewhat freely. Keep in mind that repetition is important in achieving the end result. Only the most stubborn house guest will resist the notion that the host has succumbed to an infectious disease whose primary symptoms cause the sufferer to heave his or her cookies every 10 minutes all over the house. With this understanding, I think we may proceed to the next tasteful method of guest extermination. A note first about sound effects. Sound effects can be used to great effect, but they are not for the weak of heart. They must also be used in the proper place and time. You must also go for realism. Listen to this sound effect. What is important is not necessarily the heave, but what follows, the splatter and the gasp for breath. Listen to it again. This is easier to accomplish than it sounds. First, practice on some cold winter evening when you have nothing to do by taking a cup of wet, soggy oatmeal or cereal or other splatterable into the bathroom with you, and practice your heave, then pouring slowly or rapidly, however you wish, into the toilet the cup of oatmeal. Remember that volume is not as important as realism. Another option is to ready your tape recorder. This, placed properly, can be equally effective as the live sound effect. Ready? The Dying Relative Gambit, number 2. In this method, as in the previous one, it is necessary to spend some time standing in front of the mirror before going any further. The effect required here is a stricken look or a look of hidden grief. Again, beware of sham expressions. Sincere grief is unmistakably childlike, and no amount of false embellishment helps. Keep it simple. Too much frou-frou is a dead giveaway. There is no correct attire for the dying relative gambit. If anything, inappropriate attire is best, since the host must seem to have been caught napping just when the terrible news arrives. An appearance of dishabille helps, tastefully modified and suitable to the occasion. A few strands of uncombed hair, a partly unbuttoned shirt, a shoelace untied, that sort of thing. The host must then make a proper entrance. This is much more important than the exact manner of dress, and it must be dealt with cautiously. First, the host should make sure of the guest's precise whereabouts in the house. Do not enter a room unless you know who's in it. An entrance should not be wasted on the maid. Wait until you're sure the guest is there, then walk in slowly and somberly, eyes averted. Make sure to keep your expression distraught, whether or not anyone is looking at you. Biting the lower lip is optional and can be useful if elegantly done. Walk to the fireplace, if there is one, to a sofa or chair, if there is not. Place a hand somewhere as if for balance, and remain silent until the guest asks whether anything is wrong. Then turn away. Keep your back to the guest. Count to 5 in silence, and carefully pronounce the words, "Daddy is dying," or, if preferred, "Daddy is passing on." This should be followed by a tastefully suppressed sob, which is not as difficult to execute as it sounds. In fact, a suppressed sob has much in common with the suppressed belch. If you can do one, you can do the other. The host must now appear to collapse, either on the floor or on a piece of furniture. Please note that when I say collapse, I don't mean dissolve. On the contrary, the host must appear to be fighting some strong emotion. Bursting into tears at this point would be most inappropriate. Rather, a certain misty-eyed look is called for here, best achieved by rubbing the eyes with salt. Dipping 1 or 2 fingers into a saline solution before making your entrance is always a good idea, as is placing a few grains, to 1/4 of a teaspoon, in a right-hand pocket, if the host is right-handed, a left-hand pocket for lefties. When all the above has been accomplished, the host must practice a kind of heroic restraint and wait in total silence for the guest to ask a polite question, such as,
What can I do to help?
Now is the time to burst into tears. To this end, the host must place both hands over the face and make a series of hoarse, guttural noises while rubbing the rest of the salt into the eyes. After a few moments of this, words will come simply and naturally. Oh, go away, for God's sake, is quite proper, and so is, I'm afraid I must ask you to leave. While speaking, remain calm, maintain your dignity, and if the guest is a stubborn one, try, Daddy wants to die alone in the house with me. Let the guest try that one on for size. The strength of these remarks is readily apparent. Their effect completely guaranteed. Take it from there. Final advice. I could go on to describe any number of other methods in detail, but the theory would be the same, and I have no wish to insult the listener's intelligence. The political activist past, with its implied threat of terrorism, the quiet dignity twist, a psychotic silence followed by insane laughter, the haunted house hype, a last resort carefully designed to cause a serious heart attack, all follow the same basic rules. By now, the diligent student will have sensed the essence of my message and can extrapolate from it accordingly. A note to the novice: I do not suggest trying any measures more extreme than the ones I've described, not until the host has successfully vanquished at least one houseguest. Then, go for it.